good stuff, and some of it's fairly common sense, like based on what I've just said. Obviously, if sugar's bad, then low sugar diet would be obvious. But probiotics is obviously that thing where we talk about that a lot, and it is the most obvious choice of how to improve your gut health. Now, the thing with probiotics is we're probably really familiar with Yakult, which is the KCI Shirota strain, and that is still one of the best strains of probiotics around to help with gut health. And to be honest, if I feel like I'm not quite right and something's kind of gone a little bit off, I will actually buy a pack of that and have a course of that. I do find that it kind of puts things back into balance. I guess where I'm going with that is that there's Lactobacillus acidophilus, the Bifidum bifidus, I can never say that, Bifidobacterium, and obviously KCI are the three kind of core main types that are associated with a healthy gut. Now, with probiotics, though, there's actually more specific strains to help with more specific things. So if one is to fight off bad bacteria, there's a different strain that might work on that. If you're specifically looking at irritable bowel syndrome, then there's a different strain which is more beneficial with that. So it's really something that, again, it's probably there's papers and all kind of things written on probiotics, and they're still researching more and learning more, but it's not kind of a one size fits all when it does come to that. So if you do have a specific problem, it always is a good idea to consult someone who does have a really good knowledge of the specific probiotics, because different ones do have different actions, and you can be kind of wasting your time if you're using one which isn't really directly targeting your particular one. And as I said, there's more and more research being done in terms of which ones work better on which particular conditions. What I will say is that if you're buying a big brand of probiotic, then chances are you're pretty safe that it's doing what it says. Now, I was fortunate enough when I joined Parmalat, before they were called Parmalat, when they were still Paul's. Any Queenslanders would be very familiar with good old Paul's Dairy. Now, I literally joined their company about a month before Valia launched, which is the yogurt. I think maybe most people know Valia. It has been on the market a very long time now, but that had a particular strain of probiotics called the GG. It was Lactobacillus GG, and that had so much research behind it. So I know that when they put that in there, it wasn't just like they chose any old probiotic and put it in there. Like they chose one which had so much research backing it up, and I remember we had to do testing at the end of shelf life to make sure that it still had the number of bacteria that we said it would, because obviously when you're talking about 100 trillion bacteria living inside of you, and then obviously the gut destroying a certain amount of probiotics on the way through, you have to have a really high dosage to make sure that it's effective. So that's just a little point on probiotics. Now, when it comes to just getting more kind of I don't think you can really overdose on a probiotic, to be honest. And then if you're wanting to get more natural ways of getting it in, things like kefir, kombucha, kimchi, fermented vegetables, miso, sauerkraut and tempeh are natural ways of getting that. I love a good kombucha. Again, it's something that it's become very popular in Australia, but it was really, really popular in the States long before. And a good ginger and lemon kombucha when you're not feeling quite right really does do wonders. So yeah, it's something which as they say, it's at that kind of dosage. Maybe it doesn't do that much, but I think that whole combination of the lemon and the ginger and a little bit of fizz is definitely better than just having a straight up soft drink. So that's what I'm going to talk about on probiotics. As I said, just recapping there: the Lactobacillus acidophilus, Lactobacillus KCI, Lactobacillus reuteri, Bifidobacterium bifidum are associated with improving immune response. So if you're looking to boost your immune system, then those are ones to look for. Other ones will have different actions. So that's probiotics. The other one we want to talk about, obviously, is prebiotics, which is the food for the probiotics. So having a diet with that in is going to definitely help with your gut health. Now, again, it's probably better than going for a straight-out source of a prebiotic, because some of those can be a little bit too concentrated, and all you end up is with too much gas, too much diarrhea, because you're kind of hitting your body with something in a more concentrated form than what you were supposed to get it out of food. So things like asparagus, banana, chicory, artichokes, onions, and of course whole grains are a much better way to get your fibre, to get your prebiotic fibre in. Obviously, that's food for the good bacteria. It's also, those things are all very much part of a healthy diet. Fibre in general, even if it's not a prebiotic, does help to kind of, move everything throughout the way that it should. So you aren't getting kind of things staying in there a little bit too long and causing, potentially bad bacteria to grow up. Whilst that's one of those topics that's, not the greatest to talk about. Definitely, again, it comes back to less processed food, because obviously more processed food has the good stuff taken out, has the fibre taken out. So if you're going to go for foods, go for those ones which are least processed, so they have a chance of at least having some of these in them. But, asparagus, onion, again, that some people have an issue with that. Whole grains, definitely. And bananas, surprisingly, are really good. Like, people sometimes get a little bit scared of bananas because they are a fairly concentrated source of carbohydrate. But again, as part of a balanced diet, as part of the right portion, they're a really, really great food. So that's the fibre side of it. Obviously, as we talked about, eat less sugar, eat less artificial sweeteners. Now, I just wanted to say with sweeteners, I must say that throughout my bodybuilding career, I would have probably had far too much sweetener. I must say I'm healthy for it now, but what I have done in the last nearly 2 years, I have stopped drinking artificially sweetened beverages. Now, anyone who knew me knew that it wouldn't be nothing to wake up in the morning and have Pepsi Max or a Mountain Dew. I'm talking about diet Mountain Dew if I was in the States. And obviously then all my protein powders, which were sweetened with sucralose. Chewing gum, when you're prepping and you want to have something to eat, a lot of chewing gum. So if I'd never added it up. But I do believe it was probably more than what was actually good for me. I've switched over to, either water or carbonated water, which not as much of, but that's my dentist telling me that carbonated water is as bad as drinking acid. So she took away all the fun stuff. But that's just something where I've kind of made a commitment to reduce the amount of artificial sweetener in my diet. So there is less processing on my, my kidneys as a whole, but also obviously because I want to improve my gut health, because I do believe that it is, so important to overall health. And I'm just going to slip in here, obviously, that we have just released, International Proteins Gourmet WPI, which is free of sweeteners. So, and I'm using that at the moment. So where there's an option, teas, like drinking peppermint tea, licorice tea, which are really sweet and don't require any sweetener added to them, I think that's always a really great option to try to get that down. Don't use antibiotics unless you have to. As I said, we talked about that. So obviously, if you're trying to improve your gut health, don't be running to the doctor to get a script every time you feel like something's a little bit wrong. I know a lot of doctors these days are a lot more responsible and will often say to you, like, try to hold out, like, only if you feel like it's your, infection or whatever is getting really bad that you go for the antibiotics. But of course, we know our body builds up resistance to those things. So if you can fight off something that an infection more naturally, and obviously that's why we're trying to strengthen our immune system, and that's why we're focusing on these other ways of doing that, so we don't have to take so many antibiotics. Sleep, obviously, if you don't get enough sleep and it causes a problem, then getting more sleep is a good option, and I will talk more about that another time. Stress, obviously, when we think about stress, we think mostly about, like, oh my God, it's too much to deal with, there's so much stress. But that's one form of stress, and obviously, like, not sleeping enough causes stress. But one thing which, when I was, like, doing a little bit more research into this topic, I hadn't really thought about it, but obviously environmental stress is also stress, and extreme heat, extreme cold, and extreme noise, believe it or not, is something that, has that same impact on the body and can also affect our gut health. So just, again, being aware of those things and being aware of what environment you're in, what situation you're in, and knowing that can also affect your gut health. Obviously, just bad sleeping patterns all fall into that stress. Now, there are obviously, breathing exercises, meditation, making a conscientious effort to chill out and take time for yourself is really, really important. Now, a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but, it's one of those things which I know I myself are guilty of, that to do something like that is, you feel like I should be doing something, or I'm being lazy if I do that. But understanding that you can't you can't work effectively and you can't help other people if you yourself are not in a really good place, or if you yourself are stressed and run down. So who are you going to help if you're kind of broken? So I think it is something where you have to change how you think about it and really do that self-care and take that time out to make sure that you are, removing stress from your life or learning ways to deal with it a lot better. So that's, as I said, I do want to do a much larger talk on stress, because I think it's something that, particularly in this day and age where everything does move so fast, and there's pressure to be successful, and there's pressure to perform, that stress that maybe wasn't there 50 years ago, or different stresses were there 50 years ago. There's a different bunch of stresses now. So I will talk about that. Good old exercise. Of course, that is going to help your gut health. Now, there was a study done where athletes they studied their gut flora, and they had a much greater variety of gut flora, which is good. But they weren't quite sure whether that was down to the fact that the athletes ate a better diet than the people who were non-athletes. So a lot of these factors, it's so intertwined. You exercise because you take care of yourself, means you pay more attention to how you're eating, and it all flows together. So they're not sure whether it's the actual exercise or whether it's the food that people tend to choose to eat. But either way, if one forces the other, that's a good thing. If you're exercising and then you feel like, I perform better when I eat better food, then you want to eat better food more often. Or conversely, you eating good food and then you feel like you can do more, because food alone isn't going to change how your body is. So, as I said, those two things go hand in hand. I believe that exercise has a massive impact, obviously, on metabolism and how things move through. And I know I myself, if I don't train for a couple of days or don't do my regular activity, I really feel everything slow down. Like I feel like, things are not moving through my body properly. So it is so important to keep that proper function. It's almost like my body says, I don't need that food, so why did you give it to me? And it just kind of sits. Exercise to me is all part of making that whole digestive process work. And I'm just going to say a quick thing on colonics. It's not a big thing I find in Australia, but I spend obviously a fair bit of time in LA, and I think some of those celebrities and that love going for good old colonic. If you think it's going to help your gut health, it's actually not. It's probably more than anything going to totally strip your body of all flora, so much like the antibiotics don't really discriminate between good and bad. Colonic's going to rip everything out, including a lot of your electrolytes, and it can really change the electrolyte balance in your gut as well as knock out your flora. So as soon as you've had that, you're the good bacteria basically fight off the bad. And if you've depopulated your entire system, you are so open to invasion from the wrong kind of bacteria. And if the wrong bacteria get in first, then you're going to have a really big problem. If you ever were thinking of one, please don't do it. And the other thing from that is, they talk about it clearing the toxins. Well, there is a medical reason for having them done. And obviously if you're in hospital and a doctor's saying you have to have one done, that's a different story. But if you're just doing it because you think it's healthy, it's definitely not. And also your body has ways of cleansing out toxins. That's what the liver and the kidneys are for, doing all that kind of stuff itself. Your body is very smart, a lot smarter than what we are. So just trust it sometimes. And if you treat it right, it'll treat you right. So that was just my word on colonics. But anyway, so that's the topic of gut health. Now, as I said, the gastrointestinal tract and system is literally the entire system. But obviously the gut health that I was talking about was more to do with like the intestine and the lower gut health. And I guess the part that I think a lot of the time, we really didn't pay a lot of attention to, because it's like, by the time it's been through our stomach and intestine, like after that, it's not really important.